If you drive through the village of Geddington in Northamptonshire, you'll see a sign saying the Eleanor Cross. And if you take the slight diversion to follow the sign, what you'll see is this. The cross, which presumably used to be on top of the monument, is no longer there. But then this thing is over 700 years old. That's 200 years before Columbus discovered America, allegedly. And a sign on the monument tells us that it commemorates the fact that the body of Queen Eleanor, the wife of Edward I, rested here overnight en route to London. Now, if we want to find more about the background to this story, we can, of course, look in the history books, but these days I find it easier just to look on Wikipedia, and frankly it's usually more informative. And who knows, some of it may even be true. So what we find out from good old Wikipedia is that Edward I reigned from 1272 to 1307. And he and Eleanor were married in 1254, when Edward was around 15 and Eleanor was around 13. That's the way they did things in those days. And Eleanor was actually Spanish. She was the daughter of the Duke of Castile. And Edward and Eleanor were married in the Cathedral of Burgos in Spain. Eleanor was, by all accounts, an intelligent and accomplished woman, and Wikipedia has a picture of her, though to me it looks rather like the young Queen Victoria, and I think I'd take that image with a pinch of salt. Now, although this was a dynastic marriage, it seems that they were in fact very fond of each other, and Eleanor and Edward went pretty much everywhere together. For example, in the early 1270s, before Edward became king, he went on the Eighth Crusade, and Eleanor went with him to Sicily and Cyprus and Palestine. And she was even pregnant during this time, and she gave birth to a daughter in the city of Acre. Then, in late 1272, they heard that Edward's father, Henry III, had died, and so he had to come back to England to take up the kingship. Now, Edward turned out to be one of England's more popular and successful kings. He was perhaps not quite so popular in Scotland and Wales, though. He was the first English king to conquer Wales, and he made his son the first Prince of Wales, and that title's been taken by the heir to the English throne ever since. In the case of Scotland, he didn't succeed in conquering it, but he did spend a lot of his reign interfering in Scottish affairs, and it's been described as a bit of a medieval Vietnam. And it was in the autumn of 1290 that he heard the throne of Scotland had become vacant, and so he was cautiously making his way up the country to see what advantage he might be able to take of this situation. And he was heading for the city of Lincoln, and Eleanor was with him, but she had become ill with some kind of fever. It seems that there was an epidemic going around the country at that time, so she was travelling on a bit more slowly behind him, and she'd reached the village of Harby, which is about 10 miles from Lincoln, when she was really so ill that she couldn't carry on, and she was taken into the home of a local dignitary. Now, Edward was told about this, and he was able to come and see her, and he heard her final words before she died. After Eleanor's death, Edward then wanted to transport her body back to London to be buried in Westminster Abbey. And the journey took them 12 days, and later, Edward had crosses constructed in each of the towns where the funeral procession had stopped overnight on its melancholy journey. And as Wikipedia tells us, these towns, the overnight stops where the crosses were later erected, were Lincoln, Grantham, Stamford, Geddington, Hardingstone, Stony Stratford, Woburn, Dunstable, St Albans, Waltham, Charing and West Cheap. Now, Waltham is now called Waltham Cross, and Charing is called Charing Cross. Of the 12 crosses, it seems that only 3 are still standing, and the one at Geddington is the best preserved. And it has 3 statues of Queen Eleanor around it. And it also has the shields or coats of arms of England, Castile and Ponthieu, which was a title that Eleanor inherited via her mother. And although it's a bit the worse for wear today, it's clear that it was once very elaborately and expensively carved. And I think it's a rather touching thing, telling us about the love that Edward had for his Spanish wife, his queen, and the mother of his 14 children.